Hey YouTube, it's Kel. I wanted to hop on tonight and we're gonna do kind of another lesson tonight like I did the other night. This one, as you can see, is called the Boundaries Circle. This is one of my most popular groups that I led, and I just feel like why not offer some free psychoeducation to people, right? You can never be too educated. So, okay, first of all, boundaries is such a buzzword. Let's talk about what a boundary is and what it's not. So, when people talk about setting boundaries, usually one of the biggest things that they are trying to do is protect themselves from harm without necessarily putting up walls. So it's kind of just like a form of self-care. And really what a boundary is, when you define yourself or define your boundaries, is basically saying like what is okay with you and what's not okay with you. And a lot of times, like, where you're going to need to set a boundary is, if something feels disrespectful, if it's kind of triggering some kind of anger in you and you feel like, oh, that doesn't feel good. Why doesn't it feel good? And you kind of examine, I'm either hurt or whatever. And you just see, oh, wait, there's a pattern of behavior going on. I need to set a boundary. Okay. So boundaries are, what you are okay with and what you're not okay with. Just in general, that's why people typically set boundaries. It kind of teaches other people how they can treat you and how they cannot treat you, right? So, and you don't want to get into, the thing about boundaries is you don't want to get into trying to control the other person's behavior. You cannot tell them, hey, you can't do that to me, right? Because you can't control somebody else's behavior. But what you can do is you say, hey, if you continue to do this thing that doesn't feel good to me or hurts me or makes me upset, or whatever it is, feels disrespectful, then I am going to blank. Okay, so that's your boundary sentence. If X continues to happen and that doesn't feel good somehow, then I am going to do Y. Y is the boundary and the consequence. So it's all really a boundary, but like, why is the consequence that the person's going to feel if they continue to be disrespectful or whatever it is, dishonest or whatever, right? So, but if X keeps happening, I will do Y. So you focus on what's really important about boundaries is that it focuses on the speaker. So it focuses on you and your sense of self, because you're really trying to maintain that sense of self. You're trying to protect your peace. You're trying to make sure that, your world is the way you want it to be, right? And that is, and also like your sense of self, like you're stating, hey, like I don't want to be treated badly or whatever. So you're setting your boundaries if someone does that. Okay. So that was enough on that. Now, one of the favorite ways I like to teach this is with what I call the boundary circle. And this basically, okay, if you think about your sense of self and you as a human being, this is kind of like, as you can see, this is kind of like rings on a tree. If you think about it, the whole thing is a tree and then you have rings, right? And so the same with like our soul or like our sense of self or our sense of being, we also can be, if you think about it, like rings in a tree, okay? And so what you're going to have, ideally what you want in life is to have different relationships be at different levels of intimacy, right? So, and then here, some people can be completely outside of your boundary circle or your tree or whatever, however you want to look at this. Like if they're abusive to you and somehow you might choose to say, I don't want any contact, right? And if you do the no contact thing, that's they're maybe abusive or something, and you do that out here. You put them out of your circle, which means no contact. I will not allow that. Might be a restraining order or something like that. So, but for all other people, and we'll get into kind of types of people or whatever, you may want to just place them accordingly in different levels of intimacy in your life. And the closer you get to your inner circle, the more intimate things you will tell them. The further you move them out of, into the outer rings, the less intimate things you're going to tell them. So, and you might be asking, well, how do I decide, who goes into what? And one of the first phrases that I always use with people is something you really want to discern with people is 2 words: emotional safety. Okay? You can define a person's emotional safety in so many ways. One of the biggest ways is really assessing their character, and also like, how do they treat you consistently? So if they have good character, they're honest, they are consistent, they follow through on what they say they're going to do, they're not just all talk, they don't objectify you, they're not disrespectful in any way. And then they also, like, another thing that you can kind of like look back and reflect, like, do they gossip about other people? If they gossip about other people, they're probably going to gossip about you. So you may want to keep them in the outer circle. Are they, let's see, like, gossiping about other people? Oh, if they take something you told them in secrecy or like in confidence, and then they use it against you later, or especially if they go tell someone else about it, that's a complete betrayal, right? So, but if they even use it against you later, that is not a trait of emotional safety. So again, when you see these things, any kind of like, those kinds of things would bump people out, right? Into the outer rings. So when people like are in outer rings here, there are people that you are more like acquaintances. Like in the very outer ring here is going to be like acquaintances that maybe you see them at work and you pass them in the elevator and you're like, hey, how you doing? Or they might be like a neighbor down the street that you're like, hey, you literally say 1 or 2 words every once in a while, right? That's going to be your very outer ring. And so even strangers or whatever, could be your very outer ring. And there's not like a certain number of rings. By the way, when I printed this, I just said like, numerous concentric, I think it's concentric, circles, inside each other. But you get the point that like, so the next couple rings might be friends, who you would consider friends, but maybe not good friends, so maybe friends, like coworkers that you see, at work a lot. So you see them more than like a once in a blue moon, but also like, and so you might talk about what movie you saw over the weekend or something very casual and not intimate. You're not going to be revealing a lot of like personal stuff to them, right? That's like kind of in the middle of these couple rings, right? Because really what you want to watch what you tell people, so that really the key thing is they don't go like tell everybody else what you've said and all that kind of stuff. So, okay. Then you have the next couple rings, and those are more, you're getting into like good friend territory, right? Good friend. And in your inner couple circles, you might have your best friends. So, and that is going to be like, the closer they are, the more intimate things you're going to talk about. Like in your inner circle, you might talk about if you have a argument with your spouse or your partner, or you might talk about deep family stuff, or you know what I mean? That's going to be like more inner circle territory. When someone has earned that level of emotional safety in your life, like that they are a very emotionally safe person. Okay, so now how do you kind of bump them in or out? Well, time is going to be a big factor. You don't just meet someone on your first date and you're like, oh my God, they belong in my inner circle, I can totally depend on them all the time, and oh my, they're such a great person. You don't know that when you haven't spent a lot of time with someone, right? So time, your inner circle also might be like, typically, honestly, it's not even going to be a parent. A parent typically is probably going to be in that first outer circle, because if you have a good relationship, because you're not going to talk about things like your sex life probably, or, there's some things you might not want to talk about, like all the intimacies between you and your partner, or, so it's kind of like, so, but they're definitely going to be probably close if you have a good relationship, or like, now a sibling, if they're close enough, I mean, again, this is best friend territory / like it might be, obviously, if you are spiritual, it might be like God, or and honestly, some people even put their animals in there. Now, I don't know that I talk to my dog, but and my cats, but you know, some people feel very close. In fact, some people feel closer to their animals than they do people, right? So I don't want to discount that, but also, so I would say like your spiritual advisor, or, you know, people again who might know everything about you, you got to be very discerning about those couple circles, right? So now, what kind of boundaries can you set, right? So like, you can set, there's different kinds of boundaries. So you can set boundaries on sexuality. How quickly do you want to be sexual with someone, right? So it's your body. Like, how quickly do you want to, I'm not, you know, I have no right answer. Everybody's different, but that can be a form of a boundary or a release of a boundary or whatever. So that's one. Number two, like another way you can set boundaries is financially. If someone feels, if a guy feels financially taken advantage of or something by a woman, or vice versa, you know, then you can set a boundary. Hey, I'm only going to spend X amount a month, or, you know what I mean? Like, because, you know, it depends how you want to express it. It depends on the scenario, but money. So basically money could be, you could spend more or less depending on, you know, maybe where they fall, or how you feel like, especially if you felt like you were being taken advantage of in some way, that might be an appropriate time to set a financial boundary, right? One of the biggest ways, like in dating and relationships, a boundary you can set is with time. So like, let's just say you're dating someone and you have some kind of hiccup. They do a white lie and you're kind of like, ooh, like that, it's not irreparable, right? Let's just say they moved into some of these inner rings and then you like had a white lie told to you. So you are kind of like, oh, how do I deal with this? Because I don't want to let it go, but I also need to repair the trust and make it, you know, make sure that he's emotionally safe again. So you can set a boundary by taking a step back in a ring. And you can do that with like time. Maybe you were going from like 3 or 4 days a week hanging out with that person to like, ooh, that lie did not feel good. So I'm just going to take a step back. Now, you're not punishing the person, right? Like, boundaries are not there to punish the other person. I want to be very clear about that. This is not a passive aggressive. Boundaries are not passive aggressive in the slightest when they are done right. When they are done right, it is all about the person who is setting the boundary, and they are stating what they need and or don't need or don't want. You know what I mean? So like, if the person, you know, in that example that I gave, they had a white lie told to them or whatever, and they wanted to take a step back a little bit in time and time spent with that person, because they basically want to slow it down a little bit and say, hey, like, I just need to keep observing this and make sure that it is what I think it is, you know. You can forgive or not forgive or whatever, but like, the point is that that person setting a boundary would be taking a little step back to just observe the situation and see, do lies happen again? Is there a pattern? You know, is the person really who you think they are? Are they emotionally safe, right? So, and I think one crucial point to say before we go is, a lot of times people screw up in their quote boundaries because they think they only have one boundary. Like, you won't see that, but like, how can I block out all the circle? Like, if there was basically only this outer circle, then a lot of times people think I either need to be like all in the relationship. I'm gonna try to draw it if I can. Let's see, hold on. Let's try to draw what I'm talking about. So what I'm talking about, this is the worst circle ever. But you know, is basically like, a lot of times people think, hold on, let me do a little arrow. So basically, like, a lot of times people think I'm either all in and I have to be all in the relationship and tell the person everything and all at once, and we go from like nothing to lightning speed, and you know what I mean? Or like if they hurt you, if say you got into the relationship and you're exclusive and they're your boyfriend, girlfriend, and then they hurt you, you have to be like jump all out. You know what I'm saying? So like you get into trouble if instead of this, which is what you want, you think like this, which is what I call like an all or nothing cognitive distortion. So, you've got to learn that you have way more options. And this is the freeing thing about this. The cool thing about this is like here, you only have one option, right? Be in, and if they do something disrespectful, you have to put up with it or you get out and like you're done. But here, it's like if someone does something you don't like, you have lots of options. You can, you know, like I said, spend less time with them. You can tell them less. You could take a step back in dating if you really felt like that was necessary, you know? So there's a lot of gray area. You could make your dates shorter. You could not spend the night at the person's house, or, you know, there's a ton of different ways you can move back and forth in these rings according to how safe the person is. And, you know, I really want to tell people this is something that we're not taught in schools, but I feel like if, I don't know, high school, college people got taught this, men and women, I feel like it would save people a lot of heartbreak, you know? So like in terms of, because a lot of times when they have like this and then they break up too easily, they're like, wait a second, I missed that person. I think I was too impulsive. And now I'm like, you know what I mean? So this is like, this makes it very complicated and very dramatic. Whereas this is a lot more logical and reasonable. Now, of course, I've been dramatic and impulsive too, so I am definitely not claiming to be the expert here. But thinking about it like this and knowing you have options, right? And I would recommend, if you're gonna set a boundary, to tell the other person about it. Like, okay, in the analogy of like, hey, when I saw that you white lied to me, you know, that made me feel like it was damage to our trust. And I don't think it's irreparable, but I also want to take a kind of, you know, a little step back to just reassess and make sure we're going at the pace we should be. And I'm going to do that by spending a little bit more time at home or a little bit more time with my friends. And I'm not punishing you. I just want to slow it down so that I can observe and we can observe each other more, make sure that we're the people that we think we are, you know? So that would be a good way. I am for expression when boundaries happen in direct communication, because otherwise the person can feel like, are you being passive aggressive? You know, you don't want to like go cold in a relationship, or like, you know, I mean, it's just, that would be boundaries without, like, in my opinion, telling someone is, well, I mean, you can do it, but it's kind of poor communication, but also could seem passive aggressive to the other person, where they're like, wait a second, like, what's going on? Kind of feels like whiplash, you know what I mean? And then leaves them confused and it can do more damage. But clear set boundaries of how you just feel you need to take care of yourself is the most appropriate and fair thing for everybody. So, okay, that is the boundary circle lesson for the evening. And I really hope that you're doing well. And I'm sending love, and I will see you next time. Mwah!